Christopher Langan, a man widely hailed by mainstream media as the smartest man in the world, came up with a theory that you might not have heard of. It's called the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe, or CTMU for short, which describes reality as a self-simulation occurring in a universal mind. What Chris Langan realized is that language and reality have to go together. Is that he was reading Albert Einstein and Bertrand Russell, and Albert Einstein has this idea of treating the universe kind of completely physically, whereas Russell views the world through more logical and linguistic terms. The CTMU merges those two together into a logico-geometric picture of reality that helped to answer some of the questions that he was dissatisfied with the answers of existing science, philosophy, and religion. Chris Langan, as he grew up, kept thinking about these deep questions of who is God? What is ultimate reality? What is humans' role in structuring existence? But nevertheless, he had to pay the bills. The job that he settled on as basically his career was working as a bar bouncer on Long Island, where he would work as a bar bouncer at nightclubs, and that would free him during the day to work on his advanced theories of reality. But it's interesting, many of the original insights from when the CTMU began its current formulation in the 1980s were actually written on bar napkins. That Langan may well have been doing some of his deepest thinking while kicking out underage girls and drunk patrons from bars. And I think this is a really interesting story. It kind of reflects what it means to be an American, is that he lived this really rough, unsheltered, and exciting life, but never lost sight of God and reality through all of that. Chris Langan's cognitive theoretic model of the universe is the most complete and advanced theory and description of reality that I've come across. And I think understanding it is crucial to humankind's intellectual and spiritual evolution. It will change everything. The CTMU is different from other theories of reality. Usually this term theory of everything refers to a physical theory, which means that we're supposed to unify the fundamental forces of physics into one fundamental force, and that will help explain all of these outstanding problems that are left in the physical sciences. But the CTMU is a metaphysical theory, meaning it's not only dealing with these physical concepts, but also these deeper structures of reality and consciousness and life. All of these have to be accounted for in a true theory of everything. The CTMU describes reality as a language that talks to itself, about itself, for its own purposes, which means that it has a structure that is consistent with the way that it evolves. And the CTMU is a theory of that structure. The CTMU describes the rules that reality has to take on in order to create, understand, and explain itself. The CTMU is induced from the fundamental ideas of perception and cognition, meaning that it is based not on abstract concepts from math or physics, but rather is a self-consistent system that is aligned with our experience of the world. It says that cognition and perception are not just secondary phenomena, but actually are crucial to understanding and explaining reality at all levels. The CTMU is also a uniquely structured form of logic called a super tautology, which goes beyond a regular semantic tautology like a rose is a rose or a flower is a flower, but rather takes this same grain of self-evident truth and applies it to reality. It says that reality contains all and only that which is real, which turns out to be a non-trivial observation, because that suggests then, right, that reality cannot have anything external to it that affects it in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. That reality has to be self-creating, self-explaining, and self-sustaining, since there's nothing outside of reality to affect it or perform any of these causal functions. So all of the fundamental principles of the CTMU are based off of that original tautology. So its truth is self-evident because it is induced from self-consistent logical principles. There are three core principles of the CTMU that I'm going to walk you through that describe reality with intense precision that will make you see the world through completely new eyes. The metaphysical ontology principle, or MAP, the first and most fundamental principle of the CTMU, says that nothing can exist outside reality, since anything that affects reality is part of it. Reality has to be self-creating, self-explaining, and self-sustaining, because there's nothing outside of reality that could perform those functions of creation, explanation, or sustenance for it. And so this tells us a lot about the structure of reality, is that there has to be some sort of mechanism by which reality brings itself into existence ex nihilo, out of nothing. It emerges from its own structure and then somehow is able not only sustain itself over time, but perceive and understand itself. And so this brings us into the mind equals reality principle, which suggests that there has to be a mental structure to reality. Reality is both intelligible and intelligent, with human consciousness reflecting the structure of reality. If reality is able to express consciousness, then that mental structure had to already be a latent property of the reality system as a whole. This supports a panpsychist view where everything, including reality itself, is conscious. But it is not conscious of any external object, but is self-conscious. It is self-contained and self-describing, meaning that all that exists is within reality, and it sustains itself through a closed loop of self-reference that begins and ends in a universal mind. Reality is self-identifying, which means that it has to perceive itself in order to exist. It creates an identity for itself through this function of universal mind. So these two principles combined, the metaphysical ontology principle and the mind equals reality principle, suggest that reality is self-defining and self-sustaining, containing all processes and beings within it. Reality continually recreates and structures itself with nothing external influencing its form. Last but not least, we have the multiplex unity principle. That means that everything has shared structure, and that self-creative and self-conscious mechanism is not just manifest within the global reality system, but everything within reality has to have those same rules and structure, which means that there is a distributed form of mind and explanation that is part of everything in the world. Everything is like a little node in the universal mind. And so reality operates in a stable closed loop of perception and creation, obeying rules that observers can exist within. If every part of reality had different rules, nothing would make sense. There would be no coherence, and we would not be able to exist. Rather, multiplex unity, many places are the same. All parts of reality share a coherent structure. They have the same syntax, the same rules, similar to the laws of physics, which ensures internal consistency. The structure and syntax of reality are shared universally, ensuring coherence. So this principle, the multiplex unity principle, implies that the fundamental laws of physics and consciousness are unified and consistent throughout reality. These structures do not consist of matter or energy. They're clearly something non-physical. The CTMU suggests that the universal laws of existence themselves form a language, which means a system of communication through which the universe models itself. This implies that reality has an end and a purpose, that reality is a language that talks to itself, about itself, for its own purposes, and therefore is able to intelligently self-model and achieve a certain end. And the way in which it does this is called telic recursion. Telic recursion is a process whereby some future desirable state of reality, according to its own self-ascribed purpose and end, is seen to positively influence the present moment through distributing programming in order to lead to its own emergence. So telic recursion is a form of future to past causation, which completely reverses the way that we think about how things emerge in reality. It places the goal and end of physical processes above their present state. If the universe is not purely physical but exists within this universal mind, as suggested by the mind equals reality principle, then we should expect that that mind would be able to intelligently self-configure itself to bring about a goal, an end, a purpose. And that's where we get into a dirty word in academia, teleology, which means the end and purpose of something in reality. The CTMU opens the door to a theological interpretation of reality, because when we can talk about this universal mind that has intelligence and creates and rules over the universe, when we ask whose mind that is what all men call God. That is the ultimate reality from which everything else is manifest. We are all little pieces of God and share in that fundamental identity. Information is not lost because reality is built to maximize experience. So when we have a soul that is aligned with God through correctly embodying that teleology, that end and purpose that is reflected in telic recursion, when we make the right decisions, the moral decisions on behalf of reality, we then maintain that connection to the source and soul of all of existence, and can be retracted along the mapping that created us and reunite with God. And the CTMU unites science, religion, and philosophy into one unified framework that describes God as the global identity of reality, that through which everything exists, who is self-distributed, meaning he exists within everything. He is omnipresent, as is the case with many theological traditions. He is self-reading, which means that he always knows what is the internal state of the universe, which is basically corresponds to omniscience. He is all-knowing, and he is also all-powerful because there's nothing outside of his creative influence or domain. He embodies the structure and processes of reality, and therefore there is nothing which you can separate from God and say that is outside of his power, that's outside of his knowledge, that is outside of his presence. Humans in this model are local instances of God and share in his creativity, perception, and free will and consciousness, because we are secondary images of that global reality system, and therefore we share in its traits. All things are directed towards the end and purpose of God. And when we work against that, when we do something which is intentionally destructive, we are working against God and the global purpose of reality. We are all expressions of the same ultimate identity, and therefore that we shouldn't be fighting one another. There shouldn't be all this conflict and hatred, but rather we should be working together as a unified planetary species. The CTMU can support infinite intellectual and spiritual progress. It is not a brittle and undersized pot that is meant to root bind and choke the growing knowledge of the world, but rather it is fertile and well-aerated soil from which we can grow. Humans are more important than we realize, and the CTMU equips us with the knowledge and wisdom and love that is needed to overcome our challenges as a species. The CTMU is not only the most advanced theory of reality created by a human being, it is also the greatest achievement of human knowledge. The CTMU is the greatest achievement of human knowledge and understanding in history. It represents not only the intellectual triumph of our species, but a roadmap to end the violence, cruelty, despotism, and absurdity which plague our daily existence and inaugurate the kingdom of heaven on earth. If you're interested in learning more about CTMU, you can join us at Compatriot Academy, my online nonprofit educational platform that has all of the courses and community that you'll need to take you from 0 to 100 in your understanding of reality. Click the link in the description and go to my webpage, compatriotacademy.org, and sign up today. You'll get access to 10 plus courses taught by some of the best instructors in the world, all for a low monthly fee. Thank you. Let the light shine forth in the darkness. May the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you. Like and subscribe.